Reading the Untuning of the Sky from page 104. The music praised and blamed. The very height of venom in attacking music makers was probably attained long before the middle of the 16th century, if not by zealous patristic writers condemning secular music in order to belabor the flute girls of the theaters, then certainly by medieval churchmen like the 12th century Alred, Abbot of Revolds, Yorkshire, who in a famous passage in his Speculum Charitatis attacked the liturgical music of his own day. The Gothic retribution meted out by Euronymous Bosch. You know Bosch is art, right? Bosch and the hell of the musicians. My God. Do you think they go to hell? Panel. The Hell of the Musicians panel of his great triptych, The Garden of Earthly Delights, may, perhaps as one rather unorthodox interpreter has suggested, be no anti-music representation at all. Now he's saying it's not anti-music. There's a book called The Millennium of Euronymous Bosch, and now the water's going. Can you stop it? I'll have to read while I'm walking then. Should get it. Strongest helpful assistant on earth.
You think when you do things, when you put the water and you're ready to read or walk into the shower like yesterday, you don't do that.
Yet at one more than first glance, it is a fiendish, ingenious assembly of tortures and perversions of the use of instruments that seems, except for the uniqueness of the symbolic imagination beyond it, not unconventional. From the medieval moralist condemnation of minstrels to the complex series of struggles for status by professional musicians of the 16th century, a constant stream of attack aimed at the practitioners themselves often eclipsed any more sophisticated arguments against music, pure and simple. Just as the courtly and religious attacks on music in the 16th century must be distinguished, so must learned and unlearned sorts of deprecation. The latter distinction often cuts at right angles, as it were, to the former. By the large and 2 or 3 polemical devices are constantly employed by the learned writers. In the first place, every bit of classical or Christian lore about music that hints of a judgment against any one musical form or type or institution. The Greek philosophers' distrust of the Aeolios, for example, or Plato's or Aristotle's preference for certain scales was taken as an implied synecdoche. The part, that is, was taken for the whole and used as evidence that for all of music or the specific and temporary musical institution under fire was thus condemned. Confusions about instruments and their names were put to good use so that any instrumentalist could become a fiddler or a piper, and there was always some venerable text to condemn either of these. The cleverest confounders of music in the Elizabethan era is one of the few who grant the increasingly common neoclassical premise that the music of antiquity was far superior to that of his own day. Stephen Gosson, in The School of Abuse, 1579, levels his attack against music, stage playing, and poetry. Quote, Koshin Germans, unquote, he calls them. With this historical degeneration in mind, after listing in a typical anecdotal fashion the virtues of ancient music and poetry, he asks, there's pro-ancient, I guess. Do you think ancient Greek is better?
Absolutely.
There's that opinion.
You got that fair.
Absolutely. Thank you, quote, thank you that those miracles could be wrought with playing of dances and dumps and plays and gilliards and measures, fancies, our new stains. He then urges his readers to forego practical music for its speculative branch. He's saying, quote, Pythagoras bequeaths them a cloakabag, and condemns them for fools that judge music by sound and ear. He said you should judge it by the mind. You should actually listen to music. What's he saying? You're supposed to listen to the music of the spheres or something? If you will be good scholars and profit well in the art of music, shut your fiddles in their cases and look up to heaven, the order of the spheres, the unfallible motion of the planets. He's saying to not play anything. Just sit and do sound current meditation. They, of course, of the year and the varieties of seasons, the concord of the elements, and their qualities, fire, water, air, earth, heat, cold, moisture, and drought, concurring together to the constitution of earthly bodies and sustenance of every creature, after considering the concord of, quote, well-governed commonwealths. Goshen declares with the fervor of a staunch defender of practical music for partaking of these qualities, quote, this is right music, this perfect harmony. C.S. Lewis has suggested that Gossamer's delight in his own literary style may have obscured an interest in the position he was defending. This seems certainly true in a passage which utilizes the old medieval objection to newfangledness. They were against newfangledness, new things. But where the typically euphemistic list and the paraphrased proverbs seem themselves to have occasioned the whole point, just after mentioning the Greek anecdote about Terpander and the punishments he incurred for adding extra strings to the lyre. He's punished, do you remember that story? Extra strings to the lyre, that's a punishment. Gosson continues, quote, were the auguries and Pythagoras now align, and saw how many frets, how many strings, how many stops, how many keys, how many sharps, how many rolls, How many spaces, how many notes, how many rests, how many quarks, how many corners? What chopping, what changing, what tossing, what turning, what wrestling and ringing is among our musicians. I believe verily that they would cry out with the countryman. E quod tuam piquam marcel est mihi un aru. Alas, here is fat feeding and lean beast. Roger Ascham, in the first dialogue of Taxophilos, 1545, brings up music mostly in order to discredit it in favor of his chosen subject, archery. Seems archery is better than music. Maybe it is. But his objections, or rather those of his protagonist, Taxophilos, are confined to a number of illustrations and conclusions drawn from classical authors about the weakening, relaxing effects of music. Do you think it weakens you or relaxes you? Since his main theme throughout has been the corpus sonum part of the famous dualism, he sees these effects of music as a kind of moral subversion. Taxophilos discusses the Greek philosophers' disapproval of the Lydian scale. Because of its laxness, voluptuousness, he acknowledges what appears to have been just those virtues of the Dorian, for which he is arguing, but goes on to employ one of the devices used by almost every classicizing musical attacker. Now, whither these ballads and rounds, these galliards and pavans and dances, so nicely fingered, so sweetly tuned, be liker the music of the Lydians or the Dorians, you that be learned judge. And whatsoever ye judge, this I am sure, yet lutes and harps, all manner of pipes, parabitones and segbuts, with every other instruments, every one which standeth by fine and quick fingerings, be condemned of Aristotle as not to be brought in and used among them which study for learning and virtue. My goodness. We can't play these things.
He must hear
Virtue.
Hamilton.
There is almost kind of calculated know-nothingism. What's that? Know-nothingism. Nihilism. About Asham's list of instruments in which contemporary and classical names are strung together in a carelessly sounding way. Taxophilius' real objection, it turns out, is that the minstrelsy seas of lutes, pipes, and harps, and all other that standeth by such nice, fine mimicking fingering, such as my suckers whom I know what they say, is far more fitty for the womanishness of it to dwell in the court among ladies than for any great thing in it which should help good and study to abide in the university among scholars. My goodness, that's so insulting to music. That's horrible. We're ending a discussion about music praised and blamed and Renaissance poetry with the untuning of the sky.